United States is sort of like Gulliver, and the Lilliputians of the world have tied it down with all these ropes. And he's just kind of sat there like, oh, well, I feel bad. And then he understands that he's a Leviathan. He just gets up and so I don't have to put up with this.
Hello and welcome to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. This is our Friday news roundup and lots of news this week. Trump, of course, is making most of it. So we'll start with the visit of Netanyahu to the United States. Stay with us and we'll come back from these messages. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. Victor's the Martin and Ilya Anderson Senior Fellow in Military History and Classics at the Hoover Institution and the Wayne and Marcia Buskey Distinguished Fellow in History at Hillsdale College. You can find him at his website, victorhanson.com. It's called The Blade of Perseus. Please come join us there for $6.50 a month or a discounted $65 a year. We would love to have you. Lots of VDH Ultra material exclusively for our subscribers. So Victor, Netanyahu has visited the United States this week. That's the big story, and lots of promises made by Donald Trump. And I was hoping we could go over some of them one by one. So I think the first thing that's very interesting is the idea that I think he used the word buy, but we're going to somehow buy, occupy, build back better Gaza. And I was wondering if maybe we could start with that.
Well, I'm up here. I'm not in the studio. I'm on we never really do it from my office here at the Hoover Institution, but that's where I am today. But I just say that so I point out that this is not any way connected with the Hoover Institution. I'm just here today if anybody remarks at my office. That will be unpopular with his MAGA base because of two things. There's three issues here. They're trying to cut money, and the last thing they want is another optional military presence, and that's what it would take in the Middle East. And then number two, Gaza is not like Panama. Gaza is not like Greenland. Gaza is not like Canada. People are not fond of Gaza, put it that way. They just, everything that we have given them over $1 billion cumulative from USAID, which we can talk about later. So people have no reservoir of goodwill. When they see Gaza in the news, they see two things. They see terrorists and Down with America signs, or they see people on American campuses shouting anti-American. So the idea we're going to go over there, and Donald Trump knows that. The second thing is, though, he says that we're going to buy it, run it, organize it. I don't think what he's talking about is the United States is going to send 20,000 troops there, garrison it, and then get bulldozers, demolish it, and then build a gleaming Emirates or Saudi Arabia city, and then lease it out to the Jordanians or the Egyptians, and then let Gazans come in that are back to their homes that are beautiful, and they will be audited for no Hamas. So I don't think he's doing that. I think what he's doing is he's trying to get Jordan and Egypt and the Gulf states to say, look, we'll come in here and we'll take control away from Hamas. And we will rebuild it with your money and our prestige or power. And we'll let the Israelis make sure there's no Hamas people there, or that somebody, an international group, but it will not be the United Nations. But the reason he's doing that is that every peace treaty they've had, every election they've had since George Bush forced Sharon to pull out of Gaza in 2006, there was the idea we're going to make this a beautiful place, we're going to get all this American money, and we're going to build a great greenhouse city. $50 million was one of the, and I saw that in 2006 or 7 when I went to Israel, and it was a beautiful greenhouse. And then they pulled out and they trained people and they destroyed it. They robbed it. They took the wiring out, the plumbing out, and it didn't exist. So it's the problem of Gaza is not the rubble. The problem is radical pan-Islamicism under Hamas. And I'm not trying to be too negative, but you could build, I don't know, a beautiful city. And if you have all the Gazans come back and say, thank you for building this beautiful city, and it looks like the most sophisticated, it's Paris, it's the Riviera. It won't look like that if Hamas is controlling it. And Hamas will control it unless the people at a very large majority don't want them. But let me point out something to you, Sami. When the last iteration of hostages were released, Hamas then came out of the tunnels in their green uniforms and their masks. They're so brave you don't want to identify them, I guess. They had masks on. And what were they doing? They were a security force to protect the 3 Jewish girls that had been, from whom? From Hamas? I don't know. But it looked like to me it was back to October 7th again, where the people of Gaza, who many of them had said, hey, they broke down the wall. They're raping and killing Jews. Can I get in on it? Yes. 700 went in. And then when they killed Jews or they brought them back, the mob spit on them. And so I didn't see from that reaction of the crowd to those hostages ebullition that they were getting their own people back, and it was now there's going to be peace, or what the people in the United States say, oh, great, I saw pure hatred. They were going to, and put it this way, if Hamas, the terrorist, had not been there, they would have killed those hostages. The mob would have killed them. So when you see all that, and you're in a period of cost cutting, and you've got a lunatic left that keeps saying, this is imperialism, this is genocide, all that crap, I don't think we want to re-enter into that in a very involved way. A multi-billion-dollar project that requires arms. So I think what Trump is saying is, let's just have a new idea. We'll get all the capitalist, wealthy countries in the world. They'll come under here without the UN, and we'll build a beautiful city. And then that's what I think. I don't think it's kind of like we're going to make Canada the 51st state. We're going to buy Greenland. He doesn't mean that literally. He might mean it literally, but he knows that he is open to discussion and an art of the deal fashion back and forth. He wins. And if I could just take a detour or an excursus. When he said Greenland should be in the United States, what has happened now since he said that? The Danish government has put Greenland on its royal coat of arms. They have given greater autonomy for the people of Greenland. They're very sensitive to the idea they are an imperialist power, and Greenland is a colony for all their left-wing fides. They are very sensitive to the new reality the world woke up to, that Greenland is closer to North America, New York closer to Greenland than Copenhagen. And they spent they have committed over $1 billion for internal development, and they've reached out to the United States and said, we're going to give you greater military access to stop the encroachment in the Arctic Circle, the Chinese and the Russians. Okay, that all came from, I want to buy Greenland. If you look at Canada, well, let's make Canada the first. Oh, he's an imperialist. Well, we Canadians hate him. And then what's the aftermath? Oh, Canada has a $50 billion surplus. We didn't know that. Canada doesn't let American dairy products in. Canada dumps timber in the United States, but we don't export timber from our northern states into Canada. Canada didn't do anything about drugs going across. Canada kind of waved people across that were illegal aliens, ha, ha, ha. And now Mr. Trudeau is done for. After Trump started this, he completely was paralyzed. People said, that little wet noodle cannot stand up to Donald Trump. Get rid of him. We got to get Poilievre in there soon. And the other thing that he accomplished is now Mr. Trudeau says, I will spend over $1 billion and I will get all sorts of electronics and I will patrol the border. That's what Donald Trump wanted. And then he said to Mexico, you're cheating. You're running up $170 billion surplus. It started out with $2 billion after NAFTA. You're a mercantile partner with the Chinese who send you product to get around our treaties, and then you assemble it. You're killing our jobs. You're getting $63 billion that our taxpayers pay your illegal aliens to free up money to send to you. And your cartels are killing 75, and that's not going to happen anymore. And I'm going to put a big tariff on everything. And then now they say, no, we'll get 10,000. We have 10,000 troops at the border. We'll stop it. And there's 97% of all illegal entries have ceased in just 2 weeks. Joe Biden said you couldn't do that. Mayorkas said, well, you can't just control the border like they did. And Mexico will put 10,000. Will Mexico try to cheat? Yes. But Donald Trump has told them he's if he puts a tariff on that lucrative 170 billion and he stops the border where there's no more illegal aliens and the remittances are frozen or they go down, or he puts a tax on remittances, they're done for. And they know that. And so whether it's Greenland or Panama, and then we get in Venezuela, Colombia, screw you, we're not taking back our criminals. Yes, we let out all of our people out of our jails. That enfeebled Biden. We just send all of our criminals, and you stupid Yankees thought that was so bad. Or you couldn't do a thing. You did nothing. Oh, Donald Trump's going to put a big tariff on, and he's going to embargo us, etc. Well, he's just this white slaver. And then, wow, he's serious. He's not Biden. He's not Obama. He's serious. Okay, we'll take him back. Just don't have him arrive in handcuffs, so it's too humiliating for my government. So Colombia, and so that's what he does. And the same thing is going to happen with Gaza. My God, he did this. He's a colonialist. I think I watched Joy Reid and this is people he put in as U.S. aid, and people are going to die. They're just going to die. And now he's going into Gaza. It's genocide. And they had every Middle East student here on a student visa who under no circumstances wants to go back to Gaza, wants to stay here where they can protest and be a DEI hero on their campuses. And what are they saying? Oh, this is horrible, horrible. But they're talking about it, and that's what he wants. He wants everybody to get his attention. This has been a terrorist nexus, and he's saying to everybody, they've taken Iranian money, and look at Iran. We've weakened Iran, and I'm putting maximum pressure. So it's going to start a dialogue, and the dialogue is intended to get Arab money in there, maybe EU money in there, maybe some American, not much, and then try to rebuild, but don't let Hamas in. We'll see. He had a lot of other initiatives as well with Ned.
Yes, Victor, there are other initiatives that Donald Trump announced with Bibi Netanyahu's visit. And the other one is just that the U.S. aid is not going to be receiving money because of all of the corrupt agencies it works through that are sponsoring terrorists and those things. Yes, so that was an auxiliary. Yes. There was a great study by the Middle East Forum that exposed all of the waste and anti-Semitic and terrorist activities that money was going to, and I thought it was very interesting. But your thoughts even on that?
Well, they're all related. So he's going to cut U.S. AID, and we'll talk about that in a second as a separate topic, and he's going to fold it into Marco Rubio as Secretary of State. But they're not going to be all that money, $700 million a year for the United Nations relief, refugee relief stuff, UNRWA. It's going to be gone. And most of it was, as we know, everybody says, oh, that went to hospitals and mosques and schools. Yeah, it did. And they were used by Hamas as their ground level protective, what do you want to call it, nexus for their labyrinths of headquarters and armories right below them. That's where our money went. Oh, and then he's saying to Iran, maximum pressure. That means embargo on Iranian oil. Iran will be sanctioned, might not be able to re-enter some of the banking system. He said, and we bombed, as you said, ISIS in Somalia, but he told the Houthis, he's put them on notice that if they try to interrupt, I don't think they will do that. The Israelis have already taken out a multi-million-dollar, $300 million port facility there that was built with EU and UN money and probably American money. So they have no way really to get big cargo ships at their main port. And the Israelis have hit them. For every time they've hit Israel, Israel has hit them. And they're starting to look at infrastructure. And Donald Trump, within one day, could stop all of the power. And he's told them that in Yemen. So I don't think they're going to do that. That's new. Iran, then he said another thing. He said, in the same day Netanyahu was there, somebody said, are you afraid of assassination? He was referring to a supposed Iranian hit team that was actually in the United States, a Pakistani, may have been a coordinator. And he just said, if they were to kill me, and it's not about me because I've left a letter, and that would mean about what to do if I'm assassinated by Iranians, and that would mean J.D. Vance would carry that out. He said we would obliterate. I have no doubt we would obliterate Iran. What does obliterate mean? That would mean to destroy its infrastructure, its oil export facilities, all of its military assets. And Iran knows that. And so if I was Iran right now, I would be really, really worried because under Biden, we gave them over $100 billion in sanction relief. We gave them $6 billion for, five hostages, six hostages, and we begged them to get onto the Iran deal. So they had that money, and it went right to 20 or 30,000 more rockets for Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Now it's going to go in reverse. The Hezbollah apparatus has been decapitated. Hamas has been decapitated. The Houthis are scared. Iran's agents of terrorism have been decapitated, and Nasrallah is gone with the Hezbollah. And so the Supreme Khamenei is very worried. And he's wearing a bulletproof vest now. He doesn't, if an Iranian goes to a funeral, he doesn't know if there's going to be a walkie-talkie go off or another round of Israeli intelligence is putting out, false claims. You better be careful about your cell phone. They've got the entire Iranian terrorist nexus paranoid. And now Donald Trump comes along and just completely flips what Joe Biden. Instead of counting on this enfeebled Joe Biden and Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan, he's got Marco Rubio and Mike Waltz and Pete Hegseth and Donald Trump. And they have one thing in common. They not only do not like Iran, they don't trust it one iota. And so it's going to be sanctioned, it's going to be weakened, and I would predict in about a year, if this continues, they're going to have social disruption in Iran. And that's the point. If they find out, and Donald Trump said another thing in this, he said they will not, under any circumstances, get a nuclear weapon. That would be, I would say, well, how do you know that, Mr. President? And I guess he would answer, we have intelligence, the Israelis have intelligence. When we understand that they have enriched enough uranium to deploy it on a bomb or a missile very quickly, then we're going to act. And I don't know what that would mean. I would have hoped it would mean something like Israel will be given use of a B-2 or something and a 10,000 or 30,000 pound bomb, and we will keep the Chinese and the Russians out, and they will just concentrate on taking out their nuclear facilities if we feel they're going to get a bomb. But it's a completely different world, and that's what he was discussing with Netanyahu. Netanyahu didn't know what to say about Gaza, but he just said, he's thinking out of the box. It's great. But he liked it because it meant one common denominator: Hamas will not be in control of Gaza. They had one election. They said they were democratic. I remember in 2006, everybody, remember this? If you just get Sharon, I had a professor at Cal State. I liked her a lot, but she was a nice person, but she would tell me, if we just get Sharon out there, get him out of Gaza, and then we just give some money and let them have infrastructure, and they'll have elections. Hamas is not like the Palestinian Authority. It's pure. It's a reform. Okay. And so that's what we did. And within, 2 years, there was no more elections. They took the Palestinian Authority people in the Gaza Strip and threw them out windows, Godfather style or Putin style. Yeah, they just liquidated the entire Gaza contingent that were going to had run in the election. So then they canceled all elections. Then the people destroyed the infrastructure. And then they didn't know what to do because there were no Jews anymore in Gaza. All of them were gone. And they said, well, if there were no Jews in Gaza, then the problem is solved. That was what they said. It was settler, settler, settler. Well, then
wait a second. But they also threw out the Palestinian Authority as well.
Yes,
so they just didn't like them. So, mistakes.
They killed them. They killed the Palestinian Authority, at least the top hierarchy in Gaza. But the Israeli government forced all of the Gaza, thousands of them, Jewish settlers on these hilltops. They had beautiful homes. They forced them out. But we had been told by the people of Gaza that their misery was caused by imperialistic Jewish settlers. And they didn't have a viable economy because of that. And Sharon, who was this fanatic, they said he actually wasn't. And they didn't have democracy. So the Bush administration told Sharon to get out. He got out. He got all the Israelis out. And then they didn't build a big wall either. They built an electronic fence. And then they turned over the infrastructure that was very advanced. They supplied Europe with sophisticated shipping and agriculture of winter vegetables for Europe. And nobody talks about that here in America in these protests. So you could tell one of them, if I'm looking out my window and I see there's no Hamas protesters now, by the way. They have vanished the campus. There's a new president here, and Donald Trump has announced in relation to this, if you are here in a student visa and you break a law or you're suspended, and it would mean that you broke a university law, you're going to go back. And all of a sudden, there's nothing. There's nothing. Nobody wants to go back to Gaza. I thought the whole campus would be flooded by people who would flip the middle finger and say, screw you. We're anti-genocide. We're anti-Israel. We speak truth to power. And then be arrested, and then go back to Gaza and rebuild Gaza. But that didn't happen. So I guess what I'm saying is that all of those dreams, we've been there before, and I wish Donald Trump would go back and his team would go back and visit that period from 2005 to 2008 and say, yes, we forced Israel to get out of Gaza. Yes, we left very multi-million-dollar infrastructure. Yes, we forced them to have an election. Yes, they defeated the Palestinian Authority by killing most of their top leaders inside Gaza. Yes, they canceled all further and never had an election again. And yes, we started to pour money through the UN for them, and then only made them more radical. And that was a trajectory whose ultimate station was October 7th of 2000. And so I just feel that if we do repeat that process and we go in there and we pacify it and then we level the rubble and we get all this international money and then we rebuild it into a beautiful city and then we know Gaza, but we have, let's say, a new passport control and we let all the people in Jordan and all the people in Egypt that are not there while we're building, or maybe they participate in the building. It's their country. I just don't see it's gonna be just a huge version of destroying the hothouses and the greenhouse.
Yeah. Well, Victor, let's go ahead and take a break and come back and talk a little bit more about one more thing on the Netanyahu-Trump discussions. Stay with us and we'll be back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. You can find Victor at X. His handle is @VD and you can find him on Facebook, Hanson's Morning Cup. And we've got him on YouTube and Rumble now. And these video podcasts are being made into videos. So you can come watch him there, the Victor Davis Hanson Show. So, Victor, the last thing that I noticed, or you might have noticed more, about the meeting between Netanyahu and Trump was that there was also talk of getting a peace agreement between the Saudis and the Israelis. And I was wondering your thoughts on any further peace agreements for Israelis in the Middle East?
There might have been a peace agreement, but of course, when Joe Biden came in 21, anything that had Donald Trump's fingerprints, he reversed. So there was no illegal immigration finally. The wall was being built. Stop it. There was the Abraham Accords that had already got some, 2 or 3 members, and Saudi and Saudis and the Kuwaitis were about ready. And so he said, I don't want anything to do with that. That was Trump. And then we're going to go back to the Obama. We're going to go back to the Obama strategy. And the Obama strategy is to empower Tehran, Damascus, Beirut, Houthis, Hamas, Hezbollah, and then they will balance off the Gulf states and Israel. And the Shia and the Persians and the poor of the Middle East will be we're going to be the community organizer to play the role of Obama, and we're going to empower them, and then they're going to say to the rich overclass of Israelis, and we have a voice too, and they're going to go like this, and every once in a while we're going to step in and say, we're the adjudicate. That was that insane. So we were going to take a democratic state like Israel and reduce it to the level of Hamas and Hezbollah. So that was all ended. So now Trump says we're going to bring it back. But the Saudis are worried. I used to have a lot of Saudi students, and I have a lot of friends I see from the Middle East. And it's so weird because what they'll tell you publicly and what they'll tell you privately. Publicly, they will say, we're not going to sell out the Palestinians. No. We're a pan-Arabic community. And what the Jews did to Gazans was horrible. So you have to give them an independent state, a secure, and then privately they'll say, oh my God, if we do this, we've got Shia minorities in our own country. Don't go into Gaza and empower them, or don't empower Iran, because they're going to go and peel over our heads, and we're not elected. We're a monarchy, and they're going to stir up all of these Shia minorities, and we're going to have domestic problems. We don't want any Palestinians in our country. Don't you remember the Gulf War of 1991 when the Palestinians all took the side of Saddam Hussein when they stole Kuwait from us? When the war was over, we ethnically cleansed them. We got every Palestinian out of Kuwait, and so we just sent them out. We don't want any part of that. So, yes, we'll give you all the money you need, but don't go in there and empower an Iran, Hezbollah, Hamas. That's their attitude. So they're very worried because publicly they have to side with the oppressed fellow Arab, Hamas, and the people of Gaza. But privately, they don't like the idea of going back to square one. They don't want, it's politically impossible for those regimes to let Israel go into Gaza. It's politically impossible for them to say that the United States is going to be the custodian of Gaza. And it's politically impossible to let Gaza come back under the control of Hamas. So you tell me what the alternatives are.
Yeah, not a lot, as is typical in the Middle East. So, Victor, the last thing about the Middle East region, or things that are connected to the Middle East for this podcast today, is, and this sort of happened a little bit under the news wave, and that is that the United States killed a bunch of ISIS leaders in Somalia. And I was wondering your thoughts. I was glad it was under the mainstream media news wave, but what are your thoughts?
Well, Trump used one of his bunker busters and hit a headquarters, and that intelligence had been known for 5 years. And the Biden administration, of course, didn't want to do anything. Notice there's a pattern here. All the military, all of our security apparatus, they all officially are uneasy with Donald Trump, but they had been telling the Biden administration, and I don't even want to say Biden administration, there was no Biden there. There was just a waxen effigy. It was Anthony Blinken and Jake Sullivan taking orders from the Obama people of the past who were deeply embedded within that administration. And they did not want to... Remember that Obama had called ISIS the JVs, and when he entered office in 2009, there was no ISIS. And then they started to think that Obama was weak. He said he took a lot of people, everybody out of Iraq. And then remember they started executing those people on the beach, and they cut their heads off, and it was horrible. And then Donald Trump came in, and he bombed the holy SHI, he said, and that was no more ISIS. They controlled half of Iraq. And so he knows that works. So he's coming in now, and everybody said, well, there's ISIS, and they're stuck over there in Africa, but they're going to come back. And he said, no, they're not. We're going to bomb them. And that's what he did. And so he has support from the MAGA base for that. It's a Jacksonian act. No better friend, no worse enemy. They're enemies. They're going to pay. They're not going to hurt Americans or our allies. And we're not getting into a ground operation in the Middle East that's optional. So
I think the international community loves the whole policy. They do. The Europeans, they'll all say, oh my God, that was a unilateral act. Did they get UN approval to do that? No, the UN is on the side of those people, everybody. Don't you understand that the UN was giving money, and we're finding out now that members of the UN were involved in holding hostages. UN people in Gaza that were employed by the United Nations were participating in the hostage taking. Why in the world would you give any money to that organization? And part of this whole problem is we're so inured to these alphabetic groups. NATO, you don't ever sell a NATO, you're all freeloading. Like Canada. No one talks about NATO and Canada. When Donald Trump was demonized for saying that we might have to get out of Canada if you don't want to get out of NATO, if you don't want to pay your 2% of GDP in military expenditure, this is terrible. But of the 32 nations, only six were meeting. You know how many are meeting their 2% now? 20, over 20, because of Donald Trump. They knew, first of all, that he
threatened them. They started to do it. Then Russia invaded, and he said, see? And then they started doing it, and then they saw he's coming in again. They knew. And now what did he say? We're going to go up to 5%. But here's my point about Canada. Canada keeps saying they booed us, and everybody said Donald Trump is mean to Canada. Canada spends 1.37 on military expenditures. 1.37. You really believe that if the United States spent 1.37, that Canada could take its shipping anywhere in the world and it would be safe? Do they think the Chinese would respect Canada if they had to go in? Do they think the Panama Canal will affect Canada? Don't they understand that the United States... Wait a second,
Victor. It's 1.37% of GDP. Is that what... Okay, I'm sorry. I want to make...
Yes, 1.37 is, and they're way below the 2%. So they're not spending... They used to have, as I said in an earlier broadcast, I think it was the 5th largest Navy in the world. Canada was a major player in World War II and in Korea. It was a wonderful military. Under Trudeau, it's just a joke. And so he sits there in Canada and he screams and yells at the United States. And then he looks every once in a while at the world and says, a Russian jet came kind of close to Alaska. What did NORAD do about it? Or he calls up and say, I'm still under the nuclear shield of the United States. What are you guys going to do in Ukraine to save Zelensky? Well, what are you going to do, Mr. Trudeau? You can't even defend yourself. So it's all predicated on, to be frank, and I love Canada, I love Canadians, but it was all predicated on the United States is big and rich and powerful. So we can put more tariffs on them than they do on us. And we can run up $50 billion. And because they're so ubiquitous in our culture, and from time to time, we can just kind of push them around. So we'll just leave the border. Oh, you want to go to the United States? There's the border. Oh, you got little drugs? Well, they don't care. And that's what they did. Oh, we don't have tanks. We don't have planes. Well, the United States is. So what did they do? If you look at the Canadian left under Trudeau, here was the subtext. We're not militaristic like the United States is. We don't put our nose in everybody. We're beloved all over the world. We're not a military imperialistic power. And so we don't even believe in the use of arms solves anything. Oh, but if we get in a jam with the Chinese or the North Koreans, what if they got in a fight with Kim Jong-un and he said, you know what? I don't like Canada. I'm going to put a missile in British Columbia. What would they do? Who would they call? They would
I don't
call
know.
the United
what
States.
Are they going to go?
Well, the United States is going to build a so-called version of Iron Dome or something sort of like that. We have kind of one in Alaska, but it's not very good. I don't know how Trump's going to spend all this money and then balance the budget without slashing a lot more than even Elon Musk is talking. That's another topic. But nonetheless, you know what's going to happen when we put missiles in Alaska, which is where we would put a lot of them, coming from Asia. What would the Canadians do? They'd say, oh, by the way, now what if one of those missiles from North Korea or Iran comes toward us? Would we be included in this little multi-trillion-dollar plan that you're doing? And if Trump said, not unless you pay for it, everybody'd say, see, look at him. He's so anti... Well, who is the bully and who is the person that's culpable in this whole thing? And that's characteristic of all of what we see. And that's what's so frustrating about it, because the Panamanians cut a Silk and Road deal with the Chinese. They knew what they were doing. They knew that if they cut this deal, invited China to build a bridge over the canal and update it like they did in 2000, a Hong Kong company, I think in 2016, they enlarged the lock. They were ceding their sovereignty to China, and they thought it was really cute. Hey, Yankee up there, you built it, and it's our canal, and we can do whatever. So we're going to get your arch enemy right here. And so if you have time of war or tension, or there's a problem in Taiwan, maybe the Chinese will say, sorry, there's 700 ships ahead of you out there to get through the canal. You got about 9 days wait. They knew what they were doing. Colombia knew what it was doing. Venezuela knew what they were doing when they were dumping hardcore criminals and sending them here. Mexico knows what they're doing when they're letting 75,000 Americans die. And, I really resented the Wall Street Journal the other day. A columnist, I won't mention her name, that I like, said, something to the effect, it's, well, Americans just don't need to take the drugs. It's their fault. No, it's not their fault, because they're not sending things that have a little label that say fentanyl or they're identifiable. They're taking this deadly drug that makes people get high but will kill them, and they're lacing it. They're lacing it in all sorts of opiates. They're even doing it in prescription drugs like Xanax or Valium.
So you're saying they're trying to kill people. They're trying
to hook people with as much as they can. They don't want to kill the addicts, but they're getting so much profit, they're taking that risk. So it's a question of, how do I get somebody addicted by hiding the amount of fentanyl that'll keep them alive, but I know that eventually it's going to kill them. They don't care because they think they're going to get another person. And so that's what they're doing. And I would ask that op-ed writer in the Wall Street Journal, and I'd ask the Wall Street Journal, which is very critical of Trump, especially the journalistic side, in some of their editorials, if you're correct about that the addict has 100% culpability, and I'm not trying to defend them, then why do you have felony statutes about American drug? Why do we have all these TV shows about this horrible drug person, or the drug cartel in the United States, or a drug dealer, the pusher we used to call him, on the neighborhood beat, over there in the corner giving drugs to... Why don't we just say it's not their fault? It's the drug person. But we don't, because we have laws against it. But then why, if we have laws against our drug pushers and sellers, don't we have laws or anger about theirs? Because theirs are much more deadly. As I said, if you count 775,000 over a decade, you get, and that's what it's been, you get 750,000 deaths. And that's larger than everything from the Spanish-American War to Afghanistan, total American deaths. So Mexico knows what it's doing. All of these people, USAID, to change the topic, knows what they're doing. They're knowing that they gave $40 million to the Wuhan lab for biology research and hid that. Samantha Power of all people, hardcore leftist, ran USAID. She knew what she was doing with this gay comic book and gay festivities and LGBT communities and all of this stuff. It was not... You think the Chinese do that? When Van Jones, I was watching by myself in the apartment, and I started laughing. I very rarely laugh to myself, but I heard Van Jones say, if they cancel, people are going to die. They're just going to die. They always say that. And I think a columnist wrote that the other day. Every time you have a question about a principled argument about cutting money that's wasted, they always say the same thing. The left, they're going to die. They're going to die. You cut that, you've got blood on your hand. No, you don't. USAID was created, and since we're on that topic, it's not, they kept saying, he's a tyrant, we're going to impeach him, because he wants to cut it. In 1961, the Congress passed something about the Foreign Aid Act, and the problem was that after World War II, everybody was in the business. Pentagon, State Department, you name it, giving money out. So they thought, we're going to consolidate it all, call it United States Aid, Assistance. And then the statute was passed by Congress, and they said this shall be administered by the executive branch. But it didn't say USAID. JFK, by what? An executive order. He created USAID, and he made it autonomous. And there was no chain of command that oversaw it except the president. And we have no president under Biden. So my point is, when he, by executive order, ended it, or put it into the State Department that was perfectly legal to do, because that's how it was created. The statute that passed Congress said there shall be an entity created, but they could have gone back to Congress and got Congress to pass a law for it. They didn't. They just had JFK say, okay, I'll call it aid and I'll make it this way. And then that's where it's been $50 billion later a year. So Donald Trump did something that was completely constitutionally legal. And I feel bad for the 10,000 employees that may lose their job, but people are not going to die, and they will be able to administer aid, the Pentagon and the Senate and the State Department, that will reflect U.S. interest. What we have now is a bunch of people who can't get in the State Department, and they go to USAID, and they think of some little domestic agenda that gay this or transgendered this or solar power this or abortion and this. And then they think, wouldn't it be good to give this to Nigeria or Uganda? And then there's a whole group of people, as we know, from Elon Musk. He said it wasn't a worm in the apple. It was a bowl of worm, that they know people, or they quit and they say, you know what? I worked for USAID for 10 years. I got to go to this company that's specializing in what? Transferring USAID money, giving them a program to administer USAID money from one of their grants. And it's full of corruption. And so it's not that much. It's only 50 billion, but 50 billion here and 50 billion there add up. And
yeah,
they should
exactly.
cut it and just give it money straight to and they should, I don't know how you give money. I mean, it's like giving, if you have a friend or a relative and they need money and you give them $500 and you say, no, I don't want you spending this at the movies. I don't want you going out to dinner all of a sudden. Well, how can you police that? They're going to say the $500 is in the bank. I spent it on my books for college, but I'm going to go out to dinner anyway because it's fungible. Because they're going to go out to dinner more because they have more money they don't have to spend on books. Their book budget just was covered by you. So now they freed up the old book budget to go out to eat. And that's what's the problem with all this aid. I think they should cut it all except for hurricanes, disasters, earthquake, rapid response. And if you go look at the charter, and I did look at the USAID charter, it doesn't have anything in there about gay comic books and trans this. It says natural disaster, famine, vaccination. That's what it was for. It's crooked on both ends. It's crooked on our end where we have people operating for a profit, the private contractors, and then it's crooked on who gets it? The elites of those countries that are all wealthy.
Yeah, did you hear that Uganda woman on, I don't know, it's TikTok or Facebook or whatever, she was from Uganda and she just started talking about how corrupt the USAID was. And she said it's so obvious in our own country that all that stuff is just going to corrupt causes, corrupt people.
In Greece in 1973, and I was looking at I lived in Mount Lykobatos. Maybe some of my Greek friends will resent this, but I looked at maps of the 1930s, and that priceless real estate that's elevated was not very densely populated. It was mostly a 50s and 60s phenomenon. So as I was talking to a well-known Greek fellow, I said, this particular family and that particular family, how did they get like 10 different apartment buildings? And he said, well, they were involved in Marshall Plan money and U.S. aid. And what he was trying to tell me is that Greek elites, I'm not picking on Greek, but they were the ones that administered the money, and they were the ones that saw whether the money would help bolster the economy, and this area was going to be priceless, which it is. But a lot of money came out of U.S. aid, and I think that's true all over the world. And so I really think that we need to just, I don't even think it's the matter of saving the money. It's when you give money to people, they don't like you. It's like that old saying from India. Why do they hate me? What have I done? I haven't done anything useful or good for them lately, have I? The more you do something, the more the person thinks you're arrogant or that you owed them that. And it's just better to target very small amounts after natural disasters, maybe 2 or 3 billion a year. But why would we give 50 billion abroad and then Biden didn't even go to North Carolina or Northern Georgia, or we've got to rebuild LA? It's going to cost $50 billion. Why doesn't Donald Trump just say U.S. aid is canceled for this year, and that 50 billion is going to rebuild Los Angeles?
Yeah, and the workers can go there to distribute the aid as it is needed, and hopefully not in a corrupt fashion.
We had Mark Moyer book on the corruption of USAID, remember, on this podcast, and I had a lot of people call me about that. Some of them were angry, but he was absolutely right. I think a lot of people in the Trump administration are looking at his book. When he uncovered the amount of corruption in USAID, they fired him. And they didn't know, he hadn't done anything. They didn't know how to fire him. So they went back to a book he wrote and called their Pentagon buddies and said, hey, we got a guy over here we want to fire. He's a Dudley Do-Right Boy Scout. So he's spotless and he's squeaky clean, but we got to get rid of him because he's uncovering all this corruption. How can you do it? Well, he wrote a book about, intelligence. Maybe we'll say that he disclosed confidential. They said, well, we got a problem because he gave us the book to audit it and make sure and we didn't get it on it. Well, we say we didn't get it on the first round and now he's disclosed secrets and he's a danger to national security. That's what they did. That's what we're talking about, everybody, when Trump is trying to, and Elon Musk is trying to bring sanity. And the left would just say, okay, you're right about the LGBTQ comic books and the gender studies and the 40 million for gain of function, but there was $10 billion and they were building a necessary bridge over a river, or they went in and they actually dug a well for this town. Why don't they go through the budget? There must be some of that and say, can't we defend that? But they never do.
No.
It's just this, the same thing with the tariffs. And all of a sudden, Chuck Schumer holds an avocado up and says, this is going to cost you a lot of money because what? Because we're going to crack down on fentanyl or remittances or illegal immigration. It's just, Jon Stewart had a very good skit where they said they should never bring that guy out. Every time I see that guy, I think of two things. When Trump was elected in 2016 and he came in and he said, they have 6 ways of Sundays to get you. He said that when Trump said, I don't trust the CIA. He said, yeah, they have 6 ways. He was boasting, and that's exactly what they did. They unleashed the FBI and the CIA against him. And then he, of course, got out in front, and I keep saying that, but he did get out in front of a mob at the doors of the Supreme Court while it was in session and said, Gorsuch, Kavanaugh, you sowed the whirlwind, you're going to reap. You sowed the wind, you're going to reap the whirlwind, and you are not going to know what's going to hit you. That was a direct threat to the Supreme Court. If a private citizen had done that, I think the FBI would have visited them. And
well, Victor, we need to take a break and then come back and talk a little bit about a proposal to impeach Trump. So stay with us and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the Victor Davis Hanson Show. So, Victor, yes, a representative from Texas, Al Green, got up on the podium in Congress and said that there's genocide going on in Gaza with this war that Israel's waging against Hamas, and that this was what was needed for Trump, since he supported it, was impeachment. And so he made a call for impeachment. I was wondering your thoughts.
Well, they did that in 2017. Donald Trump had only been in office, I think, 3 days, and 62 House members filed articles of impeachment. It went nowhere. I think Green was one of them. The thing is that there has been an effort of the elites of the Democratic Party. They're very worried about the 2024 election. And you can see it in that hysteria that we saw at the Democratic National Convention's elections, where an African-American outgoing chief gave us all the rules about the voting, that there have to be this many women and this many transgendered and binary. It was a joke. And then the second in command was David Hogg, who's unhinged. And so Al Green, and I think what the subtext is 25 to 26% of African-American males voted for Donald Trump. And that pushed up the number of black votes up to that magical number of about 13 to 15%. And when it gets there, the Democrats can't win because they have lost 60% of the white vote. And when you add into the equation, 55% of Hispanic males voted for Donald Trump, and that pushed the Hispanic vote almost 50-50, 48-something. And Asians went from 70% to Biden to about 43% for Trump. So there's been a shift, and you would think that minority leaders like Al Green in the House, but there's not one of them. So almost every day, Representative Green or Crockett, she gets in there and screams about white racists and horrible white racists and horrible, horrible white racists and horrible, horrible, horrible slave owners. And we had an Asian representative from Texas who was playing the race card, and he said that all these wealthy people send their kids to prep school and that they're running and they're going to cut it. And then he find out that, well, you do too, your kids. And then to defend himself, he said, well, we had to prep them to take these entrance exams. Yes. So you had the money and the knowledge, and you're an elite, and now you're... So, and then we had a lot of Hispanic represent. My point is, I don't think they represent anymore the rank and file, especially men. And I think they don't get it, that when you have a Democratic National Convention and you start squabbling over your sexual orientation, and you say 8 or 9 people have to be voted, how many were black, how many were Hispanic? Oh, we made a mistake. We don't have a non-binary. We got to throw this elected candidate. And you're a black male, Hispanic male. You're no different than a white. You look at this and you say, these people are blank, blank crazy. And then you look at other things that are happening. So you're a Hispanic family, or down in the Rio Grande, or you're in the San Joaquin Valley, and all of a sudden your school is overrun with illegal aliens, and all of a sudden M13, Norteños, Sureños, Trenta thing they're all in your community. And then you see this wealthy white guy who's a Democrat, the governor of New Jersey, Philip, what was his name? Anyway, he says he wants to well, I'm going to be a little coy, but I have a person who is not legal, but she's working there. She wants to go somewhere where she'll be wink, 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 nod, nod. And I am going to defy this by putting this person in a garage above my house. How do you think that? I feel so good about myself being a white, wealthy person, and I'm really helping some. And then all of a sudden, they asked Tom Holman, and he says, he reads the code, and he says, that is a felony to deliberately harbor a illegal alien, knowingly. And somebody asked him, are you going to do anything? Yes, I'm going to do something about it. So if we are a rule of law, and an FBI agent goes to his thing and said, or ICE person, I need to know where this illegal alien is that you're hiding, and you knowingly know that. So what did he do? Went back on, and he said, I kind of sort of said that, but I kind of sort of didn't. I didn't really mean that. I mean that she's probably kind of sort of legal, and I was just kind of sort of lying about to be kind of sort of virtue signaling and act like I'm really important. Then everybody said, well, which lie should we believe? The lie when you were virtue signaling, or the lie that you're telling now because you're afraid you might go to jail as governor? And so that's another Democratic response, along with that thing we saw. And then every day they were out in the Los Angeles freeways. My gosh. So the left organizes to shut down the 101, and the mayor, Karen Bass, lets it happen after what she did with the fires. Everybody said, there's, I don't know, 5,000 people, and they're all waving the flag. Under no circumstances do they want to go back to that country. And they're burning over there the one that under every circumstances they insist they have a right to stay. That doesn't make sense. That's what everybody is yelling. And
that's sad.
What do? You look at all of this stuff going on, and you just say, why doesn't a Hispanic activist on the left say, yes, criminals should be deported. Yes, people who are under a court order, they've already been adjudicated, they had a retainer, they should be deported. Yes, people who have broken the law since. But what about, we're willing to negotiate a year of residence, a number of years, 10, 15, in which you have been an illegal alien, you have not committed a crime, you are not on public assistance, and you are willing to pay a fine and apply for a green card. And why don't they just do that? That might entail several million. People have no problem with that, but they don't do that. They always take the people will die argument. You're going to send them back there, and they are going to die. When you see Van Jones, he's the recipient of the Jeff Bezos $100 million. So you want to say, Van, you got $100 million. Don't go on TV and try to scare us all and say people are going to die because they're going to cut out some kind of trans show in Uganda or something. They don't believe in them anymore is what I'm trying to say. They're not constructive. So I've given all these examples about this Talleyrand aphorism, they've forgotten nothing and learned nothing. They've forgotten the whole reason why they lost the 24 election, so they haven't learned how to do anything. Even crazy James Carville has said that Kamala Harris was, the seventh stringer? And they asked him, well, who would be the first stringer? And he go, who do you think? Donald Trump. To run a guy, we need a... So you think they do that, and then they have the confirmations. And poor old Fetterman was the only person to vote for Pam Bondi. When you saw Pam Bondi up there, and she's been the attorney general of a state, and she's been thoroughly vetted for years, and she's photogenic, she just... All these grumpy, grouchy, weird acting people, women must be believed. Remember Hirono? Women must be believed.
That was weird.
Senator Hirono, women must not be believed according to you, because when Tara Reid came out in 2021 and said that she was digitally penetrated and sexually raped by Joe Biden, you probably said, women must not be believed. So you have zero, but they all that. And then Elizabeth Warren, it just screams and yells. And it's like, if I lose my temper, if I act like I'm crazy, maybe I can just dispel from the collective memory that I faked my way into a Harvard Law professorship by claiming I was Native American. No, we still remember that, Pocahontas, that you were a complete fraud. And then there's Bernie Sanders, and he loses it. They all lost it. Sheldon Whitehouse, why don't they just sit very calmly and say, take the nominee. You said this is what you're going to do, and have an exchange. They can't do that. They can't do that. They're completely crazy. They're not the Democratic Party that I remember. Everybody said, well, MAGA took over the Republic, not like the Democrats did. God, that party is, JFK would not recognize it. Lyndon Johnson,
I think it's all that intersectionality and trying to get all those groups in. You were referring to that, I think it was the DNC meeting earlier where that guy was saying all that stuff nobody understood.
Well, I really believe
nobody's going to stop to listen to it.
I do really believe in a divine guiding hand. So they got together in the 60s and 70s and said, the welfare state has been achieved. The civil rights acts have been achieved. We've got affirmative action. We did all these good things, disability, Social Security. And now we don't have what we thought. We don't have perfect equality. It didn't work. So we're going to mandate equality. But to mandate equality, we have to justify how we're going to make everybody equal on the back end. And we're going to do that by saying racist, homophobic, sexist. That's the only reason we're not equal. And that's what they did. And then they said, we still don't have enough people, so let's open the border. So Teddy Kennedy changed the immigration law in the 60s, and they said it would not be based on merit any longer or ability to be self-supporting, but proximity to the border and family ties. And they thought, we're going to bring in all these minorities, and we're going to get the old binary, 88% white, 12% black, and we're going to change it. We're going to make it 70-30. And that's what they did. And they got more and more radical. And they flipped California. Thought, wow, the Hispanic vote is 75% Democratic, 80%. Flip California, flip New Mexico, flip Nevada, flip Colorado. Next is Arizona and Texas. And then something happened. People are people, humans are humans. A lot of people don't identify by their color or appearance. They just say that's incidental. I want to know what the price of eggs are, or fuel, or gas, or power. So they brought in a lot of people they thought were going to be permanent serfs, minions to their dictates, this wealthy white bicoastal elite. And now they're angry because half of them are going to be voting against them. And so the only thing we're going to see is they're going to close the border because they don't want the border open anymore. Not because they don't want to change the demography, but they don't want a 50-50 because they feel this way. As a person ages, they grow up and they don't want our juvenile adolescent agenda. But if they're already don't want it when we bring them in and they're 50-50, if the Hispanics cross the border and 50% are, as soon as they can vote against Donald Trump, what are they going to do when they get older? So our 50s and 60-year-old Democrats are going to change. And that's what's happening. And so I think anytime you try to go against a cosmic order, I don't want to be too religious, but there's certain principles. Every culture or civilization has had that. They have different terms for it. Nemesis, karma, payback's a bitch or something. Whatever it is, what comes around goes around. These are all aphorisms from different times and places, but they all capture a supernatural reality that when you continually are immoderate and you abuse the laws of comportment or decency or civilization, something comes back to get you. Maybe not in our lives, but it comes back. I really believe that. And that's a Greek idea that the Neoplatonists saw was very valuable as a method of exegesis for the later church, Christian church, that what you do on this world has ramifications for you in the next, but also for the world beyond you. So ironic, the Democrats did everything to change the demographics so they would have what they said a permanent Democratic, I'm quoting one of their books, The New Democratic Majority, Demography is Destiny. And by that, they may have ensured they're going to lose the next 5 elections.
Yeah. And I think that Donald Trump's methods are proving themselves a lot more amicable to a broader population, exposing all of the corruption and using tariffs against his enemies, or our enemies, I should say.
You know, they're not even tariffs. Everybody's angry. The Wall Street Journal said, it's a tariff is a tax designed to protect an industry from unfair competition, or the industry is, and economists hate them because they feel they reward the inability of the industry to compete. And so you're rewarding a failed industry, and that it increases prices. Milton Friedman envisioned the world basically as all of these producers, and when you don't have tariffs and you have free trade, they all come in and the consumer gets it all distills, they get the cheapest and best quality product. It's largely true. But then when you have China and they deliberately dump product at below cost to gain market share or to drive out an American munitions factory that might have national security or you name it, it doesn't work. But these aren't even that way. These tariffs were to stop Colombia and Venezuela from dumping jailbirds into the United States. They were to tell Canada, you've got to patrol the border and you should defend yourself and make your promises valid on military expenditure. They were to Mexico, stop the cartels, stop the illegals. And then incidentally, you all are mercantile, cheating the principle of fair trade. You are dumping product here to capture market share, and you know what you're doing to us. And this is not 1946 when we're the richest country in the world and you're all poor. And the EU, 500 billion, $500 billion surplus. So he's not trying just to protect U.S. steel, although he would like to. He's trying to tell everybody, I don't have it. This is not my first choice. We have tried the international conferences. We've tried the summits. We've tried the phone calls. We've tried being nice. We've tried being threatened. It doesn't work with you people because you don't think we're serious. The only thing you tragically understand is that we're going to treat you like you treat us. So Mexico, you want to have $170 billion. We'll find a way to have 170 with you. Now, we might have to forbid your products to come in, but you need us a lot more than you need us. And your remittances, you think we're just going to let you come in here and break our laws and cause all these problems and get 63 billion? We'll tax them. We'll put 30 or 40% on. See how you like that. So he has all the cards, and this is a sleeping giant to finish. United States is sort of like Gulliver, and the Lilliputians of the world have tied it down with all these ropes. And he's just kind of sat there like, oh, wow, I feel bad. And then he understands that he's a Leviathan. He just gets up and says, I don't have to put up with this. And everybody said, wow, that's mean. Where's Biden? Where's Obama? Where'd they go? This is mean. This is not fair. We're supposed to tie you down and put little needles in you. No, you're not going to do that anymore. And you'll like us better because we are proud. And everybody, it's like Fang said to me when she ambushed me in an interview. Every country, she said to you, Mr. Hanson, every country tries to do everything for themselves, only for themselves. And the United States is not doing that. So what's the tricky wiki? Why are you trying to do this? What's behind this? I said, I wish I knew. She was shocked that we were not protecting our own interests. But of course, I was emulating her accent because she was faking that accent. Everybody, I'm not making fun of a Chinese American accent. She was laying it on thick to me. And then when I said, don't do that, she went into her Valley Girl, a Sonoma State accent, okay, man, it's okay. Yeah, yeah, like, okay, man. So, like, I think you're a loser. That was her real accent. The broken Chinese was her stereotype of a Chinese person. I'm just referring to, I wrote a very critical series of columns, and then the consul in New York, San Francisco called me up. And the next thing I knew, Fang was at the elevator requesting a meeting with me. And so I luckily had my door open and two people in here while she gave me a lecture. And then she dropped the facade, the pretense, when I said she was crazy. And then she got into her Valley Girl truth mode. And it was basically, they could not believe how weak Obama was. And why was Obama letting China get away with murder? And there must be a secret plan. And I was hoping that she thought there was a secret plan, but I couldn't lie and say there was a secret plan, that he was just weak, and if they wanted to go into Japanese airspace, they could do it anytime they wanted, and Obama wouldn't do anything.
Yeah, well, we're in a whole new era, and I think that Trump's diplomacy and DOGE are really making the difference for most Americans, and they are seeing a huge contrast with that DNC conference that they had trying to choose a leader, and everybody just was like, what are you talking about? So I think that the DNC has a long ways to go, especially if their strongest advocate, the guy that's saying the most sane thing, is the most insane, and that would be James Carville. It's so real bizarre.
Fetterman has recovered from a stroke.
Yes, and he's recovered from the Democratic Party too, apparently.
He did. He's very calm. He's very reasoned. And he wasn't that way in the Oz. He was not able to carry on a conversation like that. So he has had a miraculous healing, and he understands that Pennsylvania, he's not dumb. Part of it is he's a noble guy, but most of it is he's looking at Pennsylvania that Trump carried. And they've had a massive registration. So Republicans, I think they've registered an extra 1 million Republican, and they know that everybody's angry. And he doesn't know whether Trump's going to succeed or not. And he's looking at, an election in 4 years, and he doesn't want to lose it because he doesn't want, Chuck Schumer to lose an election, or Hakeem Jeffrey. So we're at the end of our thing. And
yeah, we are.
I feel like I never do this. Because I'm stuck here. I shouldn't say stuck. I have this great privilege to be at work, but it's a beautiful day on the Stanford campus. I'm looking out at everything, and I feel like Sauron in his tower, that I'm trapped up here on the 11th floor, and there's ants down there banging on the door.
And the clock went off, so I was afraid your pumpkin was going to return.
I don't know. I feel out of place up here. I'd rather get back on the farm, but they've been very nice to me over the years, so I shouldn't say that.
In addition,
it's a beautiful campus, beautiful weather today after heavy rain, and I will give the new president of Stanford a lot of credit. Whatever he's doing, there are no Hamas camp. There are no trashing the president's office. There's no disrupting the law school speakers. Even the Stanford Daily, that was a Marxist rag, you know what they're writing about?
No, what?
Tips for study, the neatest food in the cafeteria, the latest fashion among students.
Perfect.
It's Donald Trump, the age of Donald Trump, and it's put the fear of God in.
All right. Well, this is the end of our show, so we'd like to thank our audience for joining us this Friday.
Thank you, everybody, for listening, and I'm going to exit the tower and get in my truck and be in my farm in 4 hours.
And that light is moving up onto your face, so we've got to go anyway.
Yeah.
All right. This is Sami Winc and Victor Davis Hanson, and we are signing off.